On 9/11, I was working in New York for an agency just outside the city, and during the the day, my boss came in. He said, "Hey," he says, "I know you're a responder." He says, "The city's letting you go home so that you can be recalled to work." And so I was regular day job, and I was sent home from work and told to report to my station and that I would be called in for work. The day was one of those, I didn't know what happened. Everyone's calling, "Hey, the World Trade Center's on fire." Nobody knew what was going on. And I remember leaving work, calling my wife and saying, "I'm being recalled into work. World Trade Center's on fire. We're being sent into the city. I have no idea what's going to happen." And everything that went through my head is, I don't even know if I'm coming home. I took a group of young guys with me down into the city, and while passing Yankee Stadium, I watched the second tower fall out of the sky. And that vivid memory of that tower through the windshield falling out of the sky, I can't get out of my head. Initially, the department I worked for, we went to a station in New York City, and for the first 3 days we ran calls for New York City. I mean, area that I'd never been in New York City. It's just different work. Seeing the guys that were at ground zero come back the first day, the look on their face. They were covered in dust. They looked like ghosts walking through, the station doors. That day's hard for me. I hear bagpipes and I just start crying. Right after that and coming home a week later, I went to 35 funerals in 3 weeks. And so, that day to me is important to me. I lost a lot of friends that day, coworkers, and acquaintances that, I met once or twice, that I never, would get to see again. Instructors from the academy that, I went through, were all, worked for New York City and, went into work that day and they never went home. So that day to me is important. It's important to reflect on it, and I hope, future generations don't forget it.
I was in 5th grade. I was 9 years old at Dover Street Elementary in Milwaukee, specifically the Bayview area. I remember just watching the TV, just being scared because I saw my teacher was scared. So it was hard. My teacher just basically had the news on the whole entire day. School went into lockdown. We didn't know if our little area of heaven was going to get hit next or where they were going to go next, how much more they had planned. And I remember the 5 blocks it took me to walk home, I was absolutely terrified. And when I got home, I felt safe again, but still scared because I didn't know what was going to happen next. Because my parents didn't really know how to explain it. They didn't really know what was going on. And my teacher was just like, this is huge, this is scary, this is something we're going to all have to get through as a country. And even 20 years later, we're still trying to figure out how to get through it. But my heart, it hurts for the loss of all those people, all those first responders. We're a family. We live together on shift. We eat together on shift. We're always working together. I see the people here more than I see my own family. And I would never be able to lose somebody I work with like that in something so traumatic, and just trying your hardest to just get through it. It's rough. It's not fair. But at the same time, our country came together and we were united, and that is one thing we can all agree on, and it's nice.
I had actually started my full-time position at the Dousman Fire Department in April of 2001. So I was actually in the office when 9/11 occurred. Well, I didn't know what was going on until we got a phone call at the station that said, "You need to go turn on the TV." And we ran over to the TV, turned it on. When we first saw it, it's like, okay, someone made a mistake. There's some air, it was when the first airplane hit the tower. It was kind of like, okay, did someone make a really bad mistake? And then as we were watching is when the second plane hit, and it's like, okay, something's really wrong here. I remember it being a long day. I remember we were kind of glued to watching. we had computer internet, but it wasn't as instant as it is today. So we had the TV news, and that's what we were watching. Remembering trying to make sure we called our wives. My wife was at home. My son was born in December of 2001, so we had kids at school. Are the kids safe at school? That feeling of being safe was no longer there. It kind of disappeared. And we're in the emergency services, so now what's gonna happen next? It means it's something that it changed our profession. It's put a lot more responsibility on the fire and EMS service. It's not as safe as it used to be. There's a lot more training that goes involved. We've got a whole nother response to terrorist attacks or response to mass casualty events. That it's one of those benchmarks that change the way we look at things. It means it's something I remember as a kid hearing from my grandparents about Pearl Harbor and events like that, and all of a sudden now you're living that same event that you're passing on to your kids, and it's one of those benchmarks events that you don't really forget.
On 9/11, I was at school. I was in first grade, and I remember we were sitting in the classroom and something changed the mood of everything. And I remember them sending us home and walking into my house, and my mom was watching the TV in the kitchen, and she was just crying, which was abnormal for my mom. And I didn't know what was happening, and she explained. I remember looking at the camera, or not the camera, I remember looking at the TV and seeing the crash happen on the TV, or they were playing it on the news. And my mom explained that a lot of people died today, that some bad people drove a plane into a big building, and we don't know why. And I remember that was the first time that I felt fear for home. And I was so young, so I didn't really understand it, but I was worried that they would come to Wisconsin, and because when you're so young, you don't know. So there was a lot of unknowns, but my mom did try to do a good job explaining it. Knowing more about 9/11 now, the word I think of is sacrifice. The amount of sacrifice that firefighters and public service agents and just normal citizens did to help out their community is what 9/11 means to me. I think also a big thing about 9/11 is remembering the families that were affected by the firefighters and police officers that went in. People don't take a second to know how hard it is for families to have to let their loved ones serve others and put their families second. So I think for 9/11 and just every day, it's good to thank the families for being willing to also sacrifice their loved one for the greater good.
9/11, I was in high school in my Western Civilization class, and I remember watching it on TV with all of my classmates. Well, for me, I didn't really fully understand it until later in life. I mean, when I was in high school, I understood what was happening, but the meaning behind it didn't come until later, especially once I joined fire service at the end of high school. Once I joined the fire service and really got into it, every year there was different memorials, and I really began to understand not only what it meant for our country, but also for the fire service in general. And actually, it took me 20 years, but I actually recently went to the 9/11 memorial in New York, because it was always an ambition of mine to do that. And I'm glad I did. It really opened my eyes to how bad it was. At the memorial, I saw a lot of stuff that brought some emotions out of me that usually don't happen. I usually don't show any emotions, but I saw stuff that the museum there is pretty darn cool. Images and videos and sounds from that day. Not, like I said, not just how it impacted the country, but specifically the New York Fire Department and everyone else that responded. And when I saw the videos and pictures of all that, it really got me thinking and made me proud of the industry that I'm in. Proud to serve. To me, it means two things. Number one, it's a reminder of all the blood and sweat and lives that went into making our country the way it is, and how far we've come since then. And number two, it's a reminder of what I do, being in the fire service. It reminds me of what I live for and what I train to do, and gives me the desire to keep doing that.
Yeah, so throughout that day, I noticed my teacher was crying at various times throughout the day. Different students were getting picked up at different times, and just really, they wouldn't explain to us what was going on. And at that time, my mom had picked me up from school and explained that some really bad people crashed into some really important buildings in New York City. And I just remember after that, just days on days, just watching the news and looking at newspapers, 8 years old, trying to figure out, what this actually meant. It means a few different things to me on different spectrums. From the fire service standpoint, you learn to appreciate how fragile life is. You keep your crew a little bit tighter than if something like that didn't happen, because you can't take any day for granted. From an American point of view, it's taught me perseverance. What our country can come together and get through. You see things like Hurricane Katrina, coronavirus, things of that nature. If we can manage 9/11 together and have unity in that, we can get through just about anything.
I am extremely honored to be a part of the service that is so sacrificial, self-sacrificial, and to be a part of something way bigger than myself, which I feel like is what the New York Fire Department knew going in. They knew that they may not make it out alive, but they didn't care because they knew that they needed to help out their community that they signed up for. And to me, that's such an impactful thing, to lay your life down for a friend or a complete stranger. And that's why 9/11 means something different now than fear and unknown. It means being there for others and being a community that can step up when needed and run into a burning building just to save a stranger.